All right. Good evening once again to scholars and associates. Tonight we'll be looking at IAS 23, which is borrowing cost. Borrowing cost. So borrowing cost for tonight. Borrowing cost, which is the IAS 23. IAS 23. Okay. So what is borrowing cost? What is borrowing cost? What is borrowing cost? So the borrowing cost can be defined as, or when you say borrowing cost, it's like any cost that is associated with you borrowing, right? Borrowing of funds to to um to build an asset, right? To construct an asset, to acquire an asset, right? So when you are going to borrow, what are some of the costs that you incur? And these costs are associated with the what? With the borrowing. Right, so that is the concept of what borrowing cost. That is the concept of the borrowing cost. So borrowing cost can be defined as the interest. So the interest and other costs, the interest and other costs that an entity, the interest and other costs that an entity incurs in connection with what? In connection with borrowing of funds, in connection with borrowing of funds, in connection of borrowing of funds. So that is what borrowing cost is, or can be defined as any cost that is associated with you borrowing of funds from the various banks, right? So when can we say that we are going to add this interest or the borrowing cost to the as part of the cost of the assets? The interest that we are incurring as a result of borrowing of funds, when can we say that we are adding it to the cost as part of the cost of the asset? Or when can we say we are capitalizing it? So capitalizing it means that you are adding, right? When can we say that we are adding or capitalizing it as part of what? The borrowing cost, right? So the borrowing cost should only be capitalized. Borrowing cost should should be capitalized should be capitalized if they relate if they relate if they relate to the acquisition, right? To the acquisition to the acquisition if they relate to the acquisition, construction, acquisition, construction, or production of a qualifying asset, of a qualifying of a qualifying asset. Of a qualifying asset, then we can see that borrowing cost should be added or should be capitalized. So if it relates to the acquisition of or construction of a or production of a qualifying asset, then we can say that um, there should be what capitalization. But once someone may ask, what is a qualifying asset? What is a qualifying asset? So IAS 23 defines a qualifying asset. So a qualifying asset, what is a qualifying asset? He said that it will only be capitalized when it relates to the acquisition or the production or construction of a qualifying asset. What is a qualifying asset? So a qualifying asset is an asset. A qualifying asset is an asset. It's an asset that takes that takes a substantial period. That takes a substantial period of time to get it ready, to get it ready, for its intended what use or sale. Its intended use or sale. Its intended use or what sales. Right. So that is a qualifying asset. It's an asset that takes a substantial period of time to get ready for use. What is the meaning of the substantial? It means it takes longer period of time, like takes longer period of time to be able to construct, to acquire, or to produce it. To be able to acquire, construct, or what to produce what it, right? So if an example can be um, you constructing a building. Example like constructing. So example can be construction of a building. Construction of what of a building. You and I know that it takes substantial period of time to construct what a building. It can even take you 10 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, right? Substantial period of time. IAS 23 hasn't given a specific or specific number of years. It hasn't defined specific number of years for the substantial period. That maybe if it's 5 years, 7 years, 6 years, no. But then substantial period of time means um, it takes a longer period of time to acquire, construct, or produce the asset, right? So something like you acquiring or taking a loan from a bank to buy a motorcycle. For example, like you acquiring a loan from a bank to so an interest, let's say an interest of a loan, an interest of a loan, an interest of a loan from a bank, an interest of a loan from a bank to acquire a motorcycle or a motor vehicle for business use. for business use does not what does not require what capitalization. Does not require capitalization because what has happened? Because it does not take substantial period. Because it does not what take a substantial take substantial period to complete it, right? To complete it. You and I know that if you just have cash, you just move into the garage where they sell cars and then go and buy your car, motor vehicle. You see that the car, you just get it within 1 day, you can get your car, right? It doesn't take substantial period to acquire the car, to produce the car, or to construct the car. You are just going to buy it within a day, within 24 hours, you get your car. So motor vehicle, an interest on the loan that was used to acquire a motor vehicle cannot be capitalized as part of what the borrowing cost or as a borrowing cost, right? Because it does not. So the key word is because it does not what take substantial period to complete it. That is the reason why it cannot be classified as a borrowing cost. That's why it cannot be classified as what? As a borrowing cost. All right. So IAS 23 prescribe two treatments for under the word borrowing cost. So it prescribes what two treatments. So two treatments under IAS 23 borrowing costs. So what are the treatments? What are the treatments? So what are the treatments that you can choose to use dealing with borrowing costs? All right. So now we have the benchmark. We have the benchmark or the preferred treatment. The benchmark or the preferred what treatment. The benchmark or the preferred treatment, right? So what is the benchmark or the preferred treatment saying? What is the benchmark or the preferred treatment saying? It's saying that we write off the borrowing cost. So we write off the borrowing cost, write off the borrowing cost or the interest, write off the borrowing cost, the interest, as and when it occurs, 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 right? So you write it to the P and L, to the P and L as what? As an expense. Write it off as what as an expense, right? All right. So that is what the preferred or the benchmark treatment is saying. What of the next one is the allowed alternative treatment. Allowed All right. So on the treatment, the two treatments under IAS 23. I believe you can hear me, guys. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please, we can hear you.
Okay. So allowed alternative treatment. Allowed.
But yeah, we can't see your screen.
Allowed alternative treatment. So what is the allowed alternative treatment saying? So the allowed alternative treatment is saying that we capitalize borrowing costs when it meets certain conditions. Then that we only capitalize the borrowing cost when it meets what certain conditions. So what can be some of the conditions that um, the alternative treatment is talking about? So, so conditions like okay, so that is when we capitalize when it meets certain conditions, when it meets certain conditions, certain conditions. So the condition can be that when the borrowing costs are directly what attributable to the acquisition. So the condition can be when it was the borrowing cost should be or let me say borrowing cost that forms part borrowing cost that forms let me see borrowing costs that are borrowing costs that are directly attributable directly attributable attributable to the acquisition acquisition, construction, or production of a qualifying asset. So borrowing costs that are directly attributable to the acquisition, construction, or production of a qualifying asset should be what um, qualifying asset forms part forms part of the cost, forms part of the cost of that asset, part of the cost of what that asset. So if the borrowing cost relate to what or directly is directly attributable to the acquisition, to the construction, you are going for the loan for the acquisition, for the construction or production of a qualifying asset like the building that we gave, then that should form part of what the cost of the asset. So the benchmark treatment is that they should write it off in the P&L as an expense, whereas the alternative treatment is saying that we should capitalize it or we should add it as part of the cost of the asset. All right. Okay. So now let us look at some um, examples of borrowing costs. So the examples of some borrowing costs. I think look at some examples of the borrowing cost. So borrowing cost may include borrowing cost may include in for example interest expense calculated using the effective interest method. Effective interest what method. Effective interest method as described in as described in IAS, the IAS 39. IAS 39 financial instruments. Financial instruments. Then so that is interest expense, right? And then we can also have finance charges. Finance charges. Finance charges in respect to finance leases. In respect of what finance leases. Finance leases recognized in accordance with finance leases in accordance with what leases. Leases is IFRS. The IFRS 15. IFRS 16. IFRS 16. So and also we can also have exchange what differences. Exchange differences arising from exchange differences arising from foreign currency. Arising from foreign currency. Foreign currency borrowings. Foreign currency borrowings. Foreign currency borrowings. To the extent that they are regarded as an adjustment to interest cost. To the extent that they are regarded as an adjustment as adjustment to interest cost. All right, right. So just some examples of the borrowing cost, which is the interest. Finance charges, finance charges with respect to leases and interest expense when using the effective interest rate and the exchange differences, the result of what foreign currency borrowing. Right? Okay. So depending on the circumstances, you may have inventory can be a qualifying asset if it takes what. So the keyword is if it takes substantial period of time to complete that asset, then it should be classified as qualifying asset. The inventories may be a qualifying asset depending on the circumstances. Only if it takes substantial period of time to complete it. Then manufacturing plants, we have manufacturing plants, inventories, power generation facilities, intangible assets, investment properties may also be a qualifying asset depending on the circumstance. So when the inventory is produced within a shorter period of time, it can't be classified as what? As a qualifying asset. All right. So let's look at the commencement of capitalization. Commencement of what? Capitalization. When does capitalization start? Commencement. Commencement of capitalization. Commencement of what? Of capitalization. Capitalization. Is it station or zation? The Americans say station and the UK say was zation, or which is which? All right. So when does capitalization begin? So for capitalization to be made, all the following conditions must be met. All the following, all the following conditions, all the following conditions, all the following conditions are met. So capitalization of borrowing costs should commence only when all the following conditions are what? Met. All the following conditions are met. So let us look at the conditions. The conditions are three. We have three conditions. We have what? Three conditions. When these three conditions are met, one is the expenditure for the asset is being incurred. Expenditure for the asset is being incurred. Is being what? Incurred. When the asset that you want to construct, you have started incurring expenses on that particular asset. When the expenditure that you want to acquire, the qualifying asset that you want to acquire, you have started incurring expenses on it, then you are good to go. You are on the way of commencing capitalization, right? So that is one of the conditions that must be met for the commencement of capitalization. When do you begin to capitalize? The second one is the borrowing borrowing costs are being incurred. Borrowing costs are being incurred. Borrowing costs are being incurred. The third one is what? The borrowing costs are being incurred, right? Borrowing costs is the interest. When you have started incurring what? The interest. Interest on what? On the loan. So borrowing costs are being incurred, right? You have started incurring interest. Interest on the loan has started. The third point is activities activities that are necessary activities that are necessary to prepare the assets activities that are necessary to prepare the assets for its intended for its intended use or sale are in progress or sale are in progress. So the activities that are necessary to prepare the assets for its use and what progress, right? So you have started clearing the land, you started doing things that will help you acquire the assets. You have started clearing the land, the site that you will use in the construction of the building. So the activities necessary to prepare the assets for its intended purpose is in progress. So these are the three conditions that should be met. It should be in your head. It should be on your fingertips when they ask you, when does capitalization start? Because you even use this condition to even solve questions. If you don't know the conditions, the question will say that capitalization is blah 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 blah. They will make some scenarios for you to watch the scenario to know whether at what point does capitalization commence, right? So capitalization must commence when the following conditions are what met. When the following conditions are the three conditions are met. The three conditions must be met, right? All right. So that is for the commencement. Moving on to the suspension of capitalization. When do we suspend capitalization? When do we suspend capitalization? Suspension of capitalization. Suspension of capitalization. Some say that it can also be that capitalization. When do we suspend capitalization? All right. So um, the suspension. When do you stop capitalizing? Like something like that. Suspend. You are post capitalization. So when say there is something like a hold up, temporal hold up, right? So let's say, or there is um you have stopped with let me say during extended period in which you suspend your active development of a qualifying asset, right? So you have actually paused like during you have gone on strike break, you have gone on strike, you have gone on what strike. which the strike is you see the strike is delaying the qualifying asset, the development of the qualifying asset. That suspend active development of what of the qualifying asset. When you go on strike, the assets will also pause. You are building now. You've gone on strike. How do you continue with the building? So you can see that this strike is within management control. So here the key word is put. So because it's within management control, so if it's within management control, so if it is within the control of management, within the control of management or management control, if it's within the management control or the control of management, and management slept over it, so management gave them an eye, slept off. So management, they intentionally went for the strike. It is not because of something. It is not because of any natural disaster, right? Anything that they had, human being does not have control over, right? So management have control over it. Then control, then suspension takes place, right? But it may be as a result the temporary delay is necessarily part of or is forms part. Let's say they are done with the um, flowing, they are done flowing the top of the building. So they have to leave the the building to dry up within, let's say, 1 week. They should have to allow the building when they flow the top. You see, you need to allow it to dry up, right? So that it become hard before you can continue with the first floor, right? So because they have to leave it for some time for it to dry up. That is not an intentional, it's part of the work, it's part of the work, right? So with this, we cannot say that we are suspending the capitalization because it's part of the process, part of the construction of the building. That when you build up to a certain point and you do your flowing of the top, you need to allow it for some period of time, say like 1 week for it to dry before you continue with the building or you continue with the first floor. So if it's within management control and management slept over it, then suspension takes place. But then if at- but if temporal temporal delays is if temporal delay if temporal delay if the temporal delay but if the temporal delay is necessary is necessary or is a necessary part, let me say it's a necessary part, is a necessary part of the necessary part the process of getting, the process of getting, the process of getting an asset, ready for its intended purpose, ready for its intended purpose, then no suspension, then no suspension. You don't suspend the capitalization. So the capitalization of borrowing cost means you are adding the interest to the cost of the asset, so that if you have paid 10,000 cost, the interest will be added to the cost. So if you suspend, it means you are sending it as an expense, right? And that is you only suspend when it does not form part of the process, right? It is not a necessary part of the process of getting the asset ready for its intended purpose. So I believe you get a whole thing, right? So something like adverse weather condition. Let's say you were doing the thing and then rain, because of there was a heavy rainfall that destroyed part of the. You see, so capitalization will continue because that thing was not um within the management control. Anything um outside management control can be capitalized, right? Anything outside management control which forms part um of the process, necessary part of the process of getting the asset ready for its intended purpose, can be capitalized. Let us look at the cessation of capitalization. 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 Right. So when do we stop capitalization? Suspension of capitalization is not the same as cessation. Cessation means you stop. Sus- um, Suspension means you pause. You pause the capitalization, right? So when do we stop the capitalization, right? So when let me okay, so when substantially when substantial when substantially all the activities when substantially all the activities necessary all the activity necessary to prepare all the activities necessary to prepare qualifying to prepare the qualifying assets to prepare the qualifying assets for its intended purpose for its intended for its purpose intended purpose are complete. You are done with activities to necessary to prepare the qualifying assets. So if you are done with activities, then cessation must stop, right? Right. So that is it. If you are done um with the qualifying assets, then that is it. All right. So you can see that also sometimes maybe the construction of the asset is in bits, right? Let's say phase one, phase two, part one, part two. So if the entity completes the first phase, if the entity complete the first phase, then cessation of capitalization for the first phase must what take place. There should be what cessation of capitalization of for the first part. let's say they build it phase one, first floor. When they are done, the utilization of the first floor must take place. When then now they continue with the second floor. Second floor, when they are done, utilization of the second floor must also take place, right? So if it's in part, then utilization must also be in what? In part, right? So that is it. So let's look at the last thing, one key thing, and then let's take a question. All right. So let's look at the types of borrowing costs. Or let me say types of borrowing. Types of borrowing. Types of borrowing. Types of borrowing. So we have specific borrowing, specific borrowing, and then um, specific borrowing and general or borrowing. Specific borrowing, as the name goes, you are borrowing for a specific item, for a specific what project. So you are going for a loan to build a house, right? To build a building, right? So that is a specific borrowing. You are going for a specific project, right? So that is it. And then general borrowing is a loan for general. You are not borrowing for a particular thing, but then to be used for specific, like general stuff. You can use a loan to do this, to do that, to do everything, right? So that is the specific. You loan for um a specific project, a specific what project, and the general borrowings, of course, is the loan for a general purpose, right? A general purpose. So you can use it for anything that you want to do. So let's take the specific borrowing and see specific borrowing. So let's take and let's solve one of the questions under that. One of the questions under the borrowing. So an example. I think I've shared the example to the group. Let me bring it here. All right. Okay. So all right. So let's look at this example. This example. So example one. Someone should read the example one for us.
I'm reading.
Okay.
S&D Company Limited borrowed 10,000 Ghana cedis at 10% per annum for 5 years from GTB Bank to finance the construction of a warehouse in January 2013. The warehouse would be ready for use in 2017. As at 31st December 2013, S&D has spent 4,000 Ghana cedis on the project. The company earned an interest income of 400 cedis on fixed deposits acquired with idle funds. Meanwhile, 40% of the funds have been so far committed to the project. Determine the amount of borrowing costs to be capitalized and the value of the warehouse work in progress to be shown in the financial position of Little S&D Limited for the 2013 accounting period.
All right.
Please, I'm done.
All right. Thank you very much. That is illustration. Illustration 1, right? So of course you always write the name of the business. Here it is S&D Company Limited, right? So S&D Limited, right? So how much did he acquire the loan? They said the loan borrowed time at 10,000, right? So 10,000 is the loan at what 10%. So the 10% is the interest what rate, right?
Yes. Yes.
The annum for 5 years. For 5 years. From GTB Bank to finance the construction of a warehouse in January 2013. The warehouse will be ready in 2017. As at 31st December 2013, S&D had spent 4,000 on the project, right? So that represents, they said that meanwhile 40%. So I think the 4,000 even represents 40%, right?
Yes.
The company earned an interest of 400 on fixed deposit acquired with the idle fund. So you see that he has used the 4,000. The remaining 6,000 he can invest it in savings account or in an investment account, right? And that can yield him an interest, an income. So that's why they are saying that the company earned an interest income of 400 on a fixed deposit acquired with the idle funds, right? So 6,000 is yielding him, yielding the company 400 cedis as um, as an income. And the rule is that when you have a borrowing cost is an expense, right? If you generate an additional income from somewhere, you have to use the additional income to reduce the cost. Because the borrowing cost is an expense for the company. So if you are generating income, you reduce it. You use the income to reduce the cost so that the remaining cost would be capitalized or would be used, right? So here, what is the interest on the loan? Interest on loan is how much? 10% of the 10,000, right?
Yes.
So that is giving us what? 10% of 10,000 is what? It's 1,000.
Okay.
So it's 1,000, right? So that is the
1,000.
interest on the loan. Now they are telling us that the company invested the remaining 6,000 in a fixed deposit, and the fixed deposit is giving the company 400. So this is the interest on the loan. What do we do now? We have to reduce this interest, which is an expense or cost, by the investment to the investment income. So let me even bring it here. Let me claim the 10,000 and get some. So let me see 1,000. An investment income of 400, right?
400.
So you are reducing that investment income by the income that you are getting, and the remaining balance should be the interest to be capitalized. Interest to be what? Capitalized. All right. So now that you have the interest to be capitalized, what do you need now? So they said determine the amount of borrowing costs to be capitalized and the value of the warehouse work in progress to be shown in the financial position. So we have to prepare our financial position. So the first one answers the first question. Determine the borrowing cost to be capitalized. You have determined the borrowing cost to be capitalized, which is 600. The next question is the statement of the financial position. And they are saying that what will be the what um the amount to be shown, right? So how much was incurred? And as at 31st December 20, S&D spent 4,000 on the project. So that is the cost, right? Cost
Yeah.
spent, right? Yes. So
Yes, sir.
now that will form part of. But what project is S&D doing? Construction of what? A warehouse, right?
Yes.
So can we say that PP property, or let's say property, which is the warehouse, and that is actually a work in progress because we are not done with the construction. It is part uh, finished, or is it? I mean, partly finished, right?
Finish.
So that is a work in progress, which is the warehouse. It's a work in progress, and they are saying that 40%. So assuming they did not give us this 4,000, it would have worked the 40. Meanwhile, 40% of the funds have been spent on the project. So 40% times 10,000, right? And that is giving us what 4,000. So that is the cost that was spent. Borrowing cost should be capitalized. Capitalizing means what you are adding to the cost of the asset. So borrowing cost is what? How much is the borrowing cost? How much is the borrowing cost?
The borrowing cost is 10,000.
How much is the borrowing cost?
10,000.
Really? Borrowing cost to be capitalized. And capitalized means you are adding to the cost. So with this one, we are capitalizing it. So therefore, what will be the value in the books? Value in the books will be what? 4,600. So that is the value of work in progress to be shown in the financial position. Illustration 2.
Please, I have a question. Please, I have a question.
Please have a question.
Please, I have a question.
Ask your question. Mention your name and ask your question.
Please, my name is Akufia. So I was asking about the borrowing cost. Why didn't we add the number of years to it when we were finding for the interest?
Number of years.
Yeah, they said per annum for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I was asking why when we were calculating the interest, we didn't do 10,000 times 10 times 5.
No, the borrowing cost 10,000 is for 5 years. You took the loan for 5 years. The period for the loan